Okay, we passed already 2 minutes. I think we can start. I'm going to make a short introduction and then I will pass the floor to you. Okay, Leanne? All right, well, hello everyone and welcome to another talk in our webinar series. Today we are resuming our activities and as our first guest speaker of this year, we have Leanne Guy from the Vera Rubin Observatory. And she will talk about the amazing opportunities for early science with the LSST. This webinar is also being streamed live on YouTube. You can find the link on our website or you can access it on our YouTube channel, that is /LIneA MCTI. Leanne, thank you very much for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rodrigo, and thank you for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to speak to our Brazilian colleagues about Rubin Observatory and LSST. Let me just share my screen. That one. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see perfectly.
Just okay, is that still okay?
No, now you moved it to another screen.
Okay, just trying to, let me stop the sharing. Okay. Just do this wrong again. Otherwise it will look like I'm staring into space, and I don't want it to look like I'm staring into space. I'd rather it look like I was speaking to you.
Okay.
Okay, how's that?
Yes, we can see your screen, yes.
Okay, excellent. That's much better. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to give this webinar. It's my pleasure to talk to you about Rubin Observatory and LSST, and in particular, some of the opportunities for not just early science with LSST, but doing some of this science early. So they're two different things, and I'll explain to you what they are in this webinar. I know that my colleague, Željko Ivezić, gave you a talk last year about Rubin Observatory and LSST and about the survey. So I'm not going to duplicate what he talked to you about. He gave a very good introduction to the survey, to the telescope, to the Rubin Observatory facility, to why we are building a new telescope, why we are conducting this new survey, and a lot of the science drivers behind it. I will sort of briefly cover that, but then I'm going to start talking very specifically about some of the science you can start to do now with LSST. Oops. Okay, so just a brief outline. I'll give you an introduction to the observatory and the survey, the Legacy Survey of Space and Time. It's always good to know what's happening on the mountain, so I'll give you a very brief construction update and show you some very nice pictures of where we're at. Despite the COVID crisis, we have been making progress, and it's really nice to see everything coming together on the mountain. And then I'll talk to you about early science with LSST and some of the opportunities for you to get involved now. So the Vera Rubin Observatory and the Legacy Survey of Space and Time. Until very recently, we referred to LSST as the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, and this has changed. We now have the Vera Rubin Observatory. It is located in Chile on Cerro Pachón. You can see a picture of it here just to the right in the twilight. This is a slightly older picture where you can see that the dome is still not complete. We've made a lot of progress on the dome recently that I'll show you in a minute. And you'll see just to the right, you'll see this smaller telescope, the smaller dome here. We call this area Calibration Hill. Can you see my cursor? Is that working?
Yes, yes, we can see.
Yeah, so this here is called Calibration Hill, and this dome here is the auxiliary telescope. And I'll mention a little bit more about that in a minute. This here is the main facility, the Rubin Observatory, with the base and the dome. Inside the dome, inside the observatory, we have the Simoni survey telescope. This is a large 8.4 meter telescope. It has a large primary mirror. It was named after Charles Simoni, who gave a lot of early support, financial support to LSST to build the mirrors. It contains 3.2 gigapixel camera. So this is one of the largest digital cameras ever built, which has a very wide field of view. If you think about the focal plane, it will fit 40 full moons in the whole focal plane. So right across the center of the focal plane, there'll be 7.5 full moons and 40 full moons for the full focal plane. So it's got an enormous field of view. This is one of the things that allows us to scan the sky, a large area of sky very rapidly. We have 6 optical near-infrared filters. These are very similar to the filters that we used on SDSS. So a combination, as I've just said, of this large, this mirror, 8.4 meter diameter primary mirror, together with the very large field of view, gives us a high étendue. This is an extremely high étendue compared to other telescopes, and it's what allows us to scan the whole sky very rapidly. So the LSST survey will cover the entire visible sky, so the southern sky and part of the northern sky, in 3 nights, which is really quite unprecedented and hasn't been achieved before in any previous surveys. And so together with this, the observatory has a fully automated data processing system. This is the area that I work in quite a lot, building the system to process the data that comes from the observatory. So why did we rename LSST? You probably know that it was previously called the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope, and it was renamed by an act of Congress in early 2020 to the Vera C. Rubin Observatory. And this is a picture of Vera Rubin down here to the right. For those of you who don't know, Vera Rubin was a pioneering astronomer who made major contributions to our understanding of dark matter. And the Rubin Observatory is the first major national facility in the US to be named after a female scientist. And so we're very proud of this. The proper short form I'd like to point out is Rubin Observatory. The full name is the Vera C. Rubin Observatory, but if you want to shorten it, it's Rubin Observatory. I would especially like to ask people to not use acronyms such as VRO, VCRO. We've seen this come up a little bit in papers already, and it's very tempting to create acronyms, especially out of a long name for something. But we would like to continue to honor Vera Rubin by maintaining her name at front and center of scientific papers that result from this high-profile observatory. So please remember the short name is Rubin Observatory, and I have a link here to a web page on the LSST website, which explains the accepted names and forms of names to use for the Rubin Observatory and the Legacy Survey of Space and Time. Just want to show you here our new logo. I'm not going to go into great detail about this. I've more put this here for reference. And there's a link down here to the new Rubin Visual Identity Manual. A lot of thought went into this logo to try to represent many of the different concepts of the Rubin Observatory, the very large community, the different types of objects, the varying sizes, the big data aspect, and so forth. So this is really just here as a reference for you. So what's happened to LSST? What is the survey now? If we're now calling the observatory the Vera C. Rubin Observatory, in the first 10 years of operation, the Vera C. Rubin Observatory will deliver the Legacy Survey of Space and Time. So we've separated out the observatory itself from the survey or surveys that will be conducted at that observatory. So the prime survey is the LSST. We wanted to keep the LSST acronym, mainly because it was in use. We were using it throughout our code bases a lot. It was very well known. So we renamed it to the Legacy Survey of Space and Time. And LSST now strictly refers to the survey that will be executed in the first 10 years of operation. There are many ideas already for what to do with the Rubin Observatory after the first 10 years of operation. You can probably find some papers. In fact, the Rubin PST Project Science team authored a paper for the Decadal Review, and I'm sure that the Vera C. Rubin Observatory will continue for a long, long time after the Legacy Survey of Space and Time is finished. So just a quick overview of LSST. It's a 10-year survey expected to start in 2023, carry through to 2033. It will cover the whole southern sky in 3 nights. You can see here a map of where we expect to observe. Something like 40 billion objects will be detected over the course of the 10-year survey. This is enormous. SDSS has something of the order of 1 billion objects, just for comparison. This surveying this rapid surveying of the southern sky will result in something like 20 terabytes of data per night, 10 million transients alerts per night, which will be served out to community brokers. Community brokers are third-party community-built services which will receive the alert stream from LSST, add value by doing things like cross-match or classification or identification, and then serving these alerts to the community, primarily to trigger follow-up with other observatories throughout the world. And the idea here is to ensure that we catch transient and variable events very rapidly and are able to follow up on those. Over the course of 10 years, there'll be 11 approximately annual data releases. We're currently aiming to try to put data releases out every year. In the first year, that will be a little bit different, but after year 1, 2, we will settle down into approximately yearly releases. The final catalog will be about 15 petabytes with 500 petabytes of image data products. So this is enormous. This also presents a lot of data processing challenges and data analysis challenges as well. Some of them I think that Željko talked about, big data challenges for LSST in his talk last year. And note that data releases have a 2-year proprietary period. In the first 2 years that they're released, they will be accessible to data rights holders. These data rights holders are scientists in the US and Chile, plus those other countries who are contributing to the Reuben Observatory LSST program with in-kind contributions. And I know that Brazil has got more than one in-kind contribution submitted. I've been reviewing these recently, and it's really nice to see a lot of participation from Brazil in this. So just a quick recap, I know Željko covered this, of the 4 science drivers. Dark matter and dark energy obviously is a very big topic at the moment. Cataloging the solar system, this is driven by wanting to understand, to catalog and characterize potentially hazardous asteroids and near-Earth objects, as well as conducting an inventory of the solar system. Exploring the transient sky, so this is then connected to the alerts, variable stars, supernova, looking for new classes of transients, and Milky Way structure and formation. These 4 science drivers were used to justify the survey to the agencies in order to initially get funding, but they're also very key in helping us to design the survey itself and the parameters. So, why, for example, do we have the mirror the size it is? Why do we survey at the speed we survey it? The resolution of the camera, etc. The considerations from all these very different science drivers is what led us to the design for the system itself. I just want to point out that these 4 science drivers are all very interesting, but it's not because they are, say, the most interesting topics that we could address at the moment in astronomy. It's because they have very different requirements on the system. So, for example, studies of dark matter and dark energy require us to have a lot of uniformity across observations, whereas this is actually quite different when you look at the transient sky and you go into the time domain. The too much uniformity can be problematic, and so there's a lot. This then puts different requirements on the system. So for more, I know that Željko went into great detail on this, and I won't talk too much about this, but for details of the science drivers and how they determined the design of the system, you can take a look at what's called the LSST overview paper, From Science Drivers to Reference Design. So let's take a little bit of a look at the survey itself and the survey strategy. The basic requirements for the system were derived from the 4 core science goals that I just mentioned. And if you want to have a look at the requirements in detail, you can look at what's called the science requirements document. This is quite a technical requirements document, but it tells you all the detailed requirements that were derived from the science drivers. And so in order to meet these requirements and hence to be able to do the core science of LSST, we designed this baseline strategy. And this is the area that you see here in green. This is called the Wide, Fast, Deep survey, or also the baseline strategy. We will spend roughly 90% of the survey time on the Wide, Fast, Deep survey. It needs to cover 18,000 square degrees. This is a requirement that comes from cosmology, for the needs for cosmology, and should have about 825 visits per field over the 10 years of the survey. Also, it's not just the number of visits that we want over the course of the 10 years, but the how often we visit these pairs, the cadence, for example. So we also have a requirement, and this is driven primarily by time domain science, to have a same night, same field revisit. So pairs of visits on the same field every night. In addition to this green area, which we call the Wide, Fast, Deep, there are other areas that are interesting to cover. So we have 4 deep drilling fields, and you can see here based on the colors that the number of observations that we will get here is much higher than for the wide, fast, deep, and goes higher than 1,000. These will be observed at more intense periods, but we'll have larger numbers of visits for each deep drilling field. And they're designed to cover areas of the sky that have been surveyed by other surveys as well. The North Ecliptic Spur, this is quite important here for trans-Neptunian objects. We will be able to detect a lot of those from the North Ecliptic Spur. The South Celestial Pole is also very interesting. It covers a lot of work that's been done in previous catalogs. So this just gives you an idea of what we currently call the baseline strategy. However, I want to point out that optimizing the LSST to maximize scientific return, taking into account all the 4 different science drivers, so cataloging the solar system as opposed to cosmological studies have quite different requirements, and it's still a very open question as to how we really are going to conduct the survey. So some of the open questions about the survey strategy and around, say, the wide, fast, deep, what we call the main survey, is how should the wide, fast, deep area be defined? Should it go up into the northern hemisphere? What should be the cadence? How often should the different fields be revisited? Within a night, between nights? So we have a requirement to do pairs within a night, but how often then do we need to come back to that in subsequent nights? And what's the effect then on time domain science? And then what's also the knock-on effects on other science areas? What about the filters? What's the optimal filter distribution for wide, fast, deep fields? Different science drivers are interested in observations in different filters. We have 6 filters, only 5 can be loaded into the carousel at a time. So during the day, probably once every month or so, we'll load up the filter that is not in the carousel and then take those observations. What is the optimal strategy for distributing the observations across the different filters? And what are the optimal intra-night filter pairs for the wide, fast, deep field revisits? How often should we be going back and revisiting these? So there are still quite a lot of open questions, even around the wide, fast, deep survey, in which we'll be spending 90% of our time. Deep drilling fields and mini surveys. So Euclid Deep Field South, for example, we're discussing should this be added to the deep drilling fields? Is this interesting here to look at? What about the mini surveys, the North Ecliptic Spur? Are there other areas that people are interested in? And things like gravitational wave target of opportunity. How frequently should we stop the survey if we get a trigger from a gravitational wave experiment to go and make some target of opportunity observations, which would be excellent follow-up for any observations made by gravitational wave experiments. But the more time that we spend outside of our main survey, the more we risk our core science goals. So how do we balance the target of opportunity with our core science goals? These questions are all very open questions, and quite recently the Reuben project made a report to the Survey Cadence Optimization Committee to address these questions, these and many other questions. There's a link here to the report, which if you're interested in understanding the survey strategy and how it will serve your science, I would strongly encourage you to read. It gives a lot of links and a lot of information to survey simulations that have been done by our survey simulations team, which can be very useful to you as well in understanding the science performance that you will get for the various different cadences and strategies. Just a quick note here about the timeline for attempting to optimize the initial survey strategy. We're about here at the moment. We had a workshop last year in November 2020, which was virtual, and there's an open call at the moment for white papers for proposing survey strategies. And this is the 15th of April, 2021. There's a deadline. And then following that, there will be a series of meetings with the Survey Cadence Optimization Committee, with the science collaborations to try to understand some of the implications of the white papers that have been submitted. We intend to continue to hold a series of workshops as we continue through the end of the construction project. A second workshop later this year in 2021, based on the draft recommendations for the survey, and then later a third workshop in 2022. We expect to have the observing strategy fixed, not only fixed, sorry, but implemented in the schedule and the observatory control system by early 2023. And we're looking at probably an October 2023 start to the survey. And so now just a quick word on the data processing system. All this data that we collect through the survey has to be processed. So the 20 terabytes of raw data that I mentioned that we collect on the sky are collected in the form of sequential 30-second images. So one image has a 30-second exposure time, and with this 30-second exposure time throughout the whole night, we'll get about 20 terabytes of data per night. This data is transferred from the summit to the base station to the US data facility, which has now been decided will be at SLAC in the US, in California. And this data will be processed by the LSST science pipelines. And out of the science pipelines, there will be various different types of data products that will be produced. So the prompt data products, these will come out on a 60-second or a 24-hour cadence. The prompt products include the alerts. We're expecting something like 10 million alerts per night. These will come out within 60 seconds of shutter close. So an image is taken, the shutter is closed, the data is transferred, it is processed, and within 60 seconds, this event stream is transmitted to community alert brokers who will then serve this data to the whole community and work together with other facilities to trigger follow-up. Within 24 hours, we will do a slightly more detailed difference image analysis to look at detecting transient and variable sources, and we will also run our solar system processing pipeline. And this will produce the prompt products database within about 24 hours, which will be available at the Rubin Observatory Data Access Centers. So sorry, that's all, it's not NCSA anymore, it's the USDF at SLAC and also in Chile, but also through a series of independent data access centers that will be set up throughout the world as part of the in-kind program. And then on roughly a yearly basis, we will have the data release data products. These will come out every year. They will also be served from the US data facility and through the independent data access centers. This includes the images and the catalogs that will be accessible. And all this data will be accessible to you, data rights holders, through the LSST Science platform, which provides services to the users to access the data. There are three aspects to this: a portal, Jupyter Notebooks, and web APIs. There's a TAP service, so you can work with your favorite tools to access data that's at the US data facility. So just a quick word on the current survey schedule. COVID has impacted us a lot. The current schedule is in flux. I will say, we're currently expecting engineering first light in just over a year. The LSST camera first light is later in October 22. We're currently planning for a start to operations on the 1st of October 2023, and to execute the 10-year legacy survey of space and time to 24 to that would be 34, sorry. So it will be late 23, early 24 that we will start the LSST. But COVID has affected us all, and the schedule is in flux, and we continue to work together with the agencies to replan the project. As of this time, we're expecting roughly a 1-year delay, and that's already incorporated in these numbers. Okay, so that's just a brief overview of the observatory and the survey itself. Let me give you a quick tour of what's happening in construction. These photos are really exciting. Have a look at this one here on the right. You can see here we are in Chile. Here's the great big crane. Here is the Reuben Observatory facility itself. And if you look in, you can see this is the Simoni survey telescope, which has been mounted. It's in the dome, and it's set up. This is really exciting to see. This photo is hot off the press just from 2 days ago. And you can see that the top part of the TMA, I'll show you a picture in a second, has also been mounted there. The dome is mostly complete. You can see the louvers are in place and it's mostly closed up. So this is really exciting to see progress on the dome. If you remember the first photo I showed you where it was very open. We're sort of racing against the clock to beat the start of the Chilean winter. This is the telescope mount assembly here. This is it within the dome. It's been mounted, it's being reassembled. The contractors from Europe are starting to come over again. Work had to be stopped on the TMA because of COVID, but it's picked up again. Here you can see the top part of the telescope mount assembly being lowered into the dome and fixed onto, you can see it's been fixed onto the Simoni survey telescope here. So this is really exciting to see the progress made on the construction of the telescope itself. The camera system, you may have seen some announcements earlier in the year. This is our camera focal plane, the 3.2 gigapixel focal plane here. It has been fully constructed now. And all the hardware for the camera system has been fabricated, except for the filters. That's the one thing that we're still really waiting on is to finish the filters. The camera system is still all at SLAC. SLAC in the US here is the institute that has been responsible for building the camera. So now we currently have the 22 science rafts, the 5 corner rafts, the lenses, the data acquisition system, all the auxiliary electronics, the cryosat, shutters, filter exchange system. Here you see the filter exchange system with the shutters. on the front. This is all now in place. So this is really exciting. This here is the commissioning camera. I'm not sure if you've heard of the commissioning camera. The commissioning camera is one raft. So a raft is 3 by 3 sensors. This would be roughly a raft here. This is what's going to be used. The commissioning camera is basically a smaller version of LSST. The LSST camera is going to be put onto the telescope mount assembly early on so that we can test the integration and test the system. We don't want to put the camera on and have something go wrong and break it. So ComCam will go on, and we're going to execute a program of on-sky observations with ComCam just using one raft. So it's a smaller version of the camera early on in commissioning. Okay, so early science. What sort of science can we do with this? Let's talk about early science. Early science is what we can do in very early in the survey, obviously. Science during the first year of operations is a high priority for Rubin Observatory. We have been given guidance by the National Science Foundation to think about high profile, high impact science that can come out early. And so we've started work on this document. This is a work in progress, but if you're interested, follow it. We expect to make it to complete the first draft by around June this year, and then have it part of the operations proposal for later in the year. But it's a living document and will evolve over the course of the pre-operations work. And here we outline what sort of science we want to focus on in the very early parts of the survey. So when we say early science, what exactly do we mean? The first data release is expected to come out 1 year after the start of operations. It will be based on 6 months of data. So we start LSST, we start the survey, we take 6 months of data, we take that data set and then we start to process it, and 6 months later, that is 1 year after the start of operations, we make data release 1. But this means that apart from the transient alert, the alerts to transient and variable objects, there will be no catalogs released prior to data release 1. So what we mean by early science is anything that we can do with what we have before data release 1. Expectations of early science have been built around the science verification and validation surveys coming out of the commissioning period. I can talk about that in just a minute, but basically a lot of what we can do early on in the survey is going to depend upon how the commissioning, verification, and validation surveys pan out. So this is our current on-sky observing schedule. I haven't put any exact dates in here for the simple reason that we're currently going through a rebaseline or a replanning with the agencies because of COVID, but roughly the time blocks will stay the same here. With the commissioning camera, we'll put this on the TMA and have some early system integration, which will be roughly 3 months of technical INT with ComCam. So this is very technical stuff like verification of system interfaces, software system, transport of data through to the US data facility, and commissioning of the refrigeration system that will eventually be used for the full LSST camera, but we will commission that with ComCam. So then we will do essentially the same sort of thing. We'll do a re-verification of all these interfaces and systems with the LSST camera. That will also take about 3 months. And out of these 2 periods, we expect a lot of images will be taken. These will be a lot of engineering images. Now, just because they're engineering images doesn't mean they can't be used for science, and we are hoping that a lot of these images that come out of this period will also be useful for science. And then after we've been through the technical integration testing with the LSST camera, we will spend roughly 2 months doing what we call science verification and validation surveys. So part of this will involve doing a wide area survey to generate templates. The templates will be used for difference image analysis, and this is the basis of the alerts, generating the alert packets and triggering on objects on the sky that have changed in either position or brightness. We will then attempt to do a full depth survey, a 10-year survey in selected fields, and we will choose the area of the sky to overlap with external imaging and spectroscopy. This is for verification validation. And then we will do another wide area real-time survey for alert production. So this is basically our plan for on-sky observing at the moment. The data that comes out of this is going to be very useful to us in doing early science. And so the sort of expectations we have basically at the moment are that, as I said, the commissioning camera and the LSST camera integration and test, we expect will give us modest amounts of science quality image with which we can start to do some basic science and so forth. The science verification surveys in a sort of minimal plan, we will expect to do we should be able to do some single visit work, and there's the full depth survey, as I said. So, if we use all of the filters, we might get sort of 4 nights worth of data 4 epochs. We will have to test the scheduler, which will give us about 3 nights of data. The full depth survey will go to 20-year depth, so we might get something like 5K visits over 8 nights. And the wide area survey, we expect to maybe cover about 800 square degrees in not all of the filters, but some of the filters to a 1-year equivalent depth. So this should give us a good chunk of data with which we can think to do early science. You may have heard about the data previews. Once we, with this, the commissioning camera and the LSST camera data, we intend to make this data available to our data rights holders, to the public. And we're planning to do this through a series of 3 what we call pre-survey data previews. So note the terminology. Any data that we release to our community that comes out of our commissioning activities and that we release prior to the start of the survey is termed a data preview. Anything that is released to the community after we start LSST operations, Rubin Observatory operations, is a data release. So these data previews are going to be based around simulated data, as well as data from LSST cam and the commissioning camera. And the goal here is for us to try to develop our capabilities to produce LSST data and to verify and release them. So we have a series of 3 data releases planned: DP0, DP1, and DP2. This shows you the schedule up here. For DP0, we're collaborating initially with DESK. We don't have data yet from the commissioning camera and from the LSST camera. So to get started early, we're going to be serving up the DESK Data Challenge 2 simulated, large-scale simulated data set throughout the rest of 2021 at the IDF. The IDF is the Interim Data Facility. This is a cloud-based data facility. It's based at Google, and it's what we're using while we wait for the US data facility at SLAC to get set up. At some point, we will transfer from this interim data facility to the SLAC-based data facility, although we do hope that users won't really notice a great deal of difference on this because users will access the data through the science platform. So then following DP0, we have DP1 and DP2, through which we will release and support the commissioning data in preparation for the start of survey operations. Quick note on the Rubin Science platform. Some of you may well have used this already if you're part of the Stack Club work, but if not, you will be able to start using this soon as part of DP0 if you apply to join DP0. More on that in a second. But as I mentioned before, there's a portal aspect which allows you to explore and visualize the data that's in the Rubin archive. Then there's a notebook aspect which allows you to write Jupyter notebooks to do in-depth next to the data analysis and create user-generated data products. And then there's the API aspect, which uses IVOA standards and allows you to connect to the archive from outside the science platform using some of your favorite tools. The Rubin Science platform will be the main interface to our community to access data from both the data previews and from the data releases. Full details of the science platform vision are in this document here that you can go to if you like, but it's been designed around concepts of enabling petascale analysis of the LSST data. So the old regime of here's the archive, I'll just take this data, I'll download it to my computer, I'll load it up in memory and I'll start doing some analysis, and this just doesn't work anymore, and it won't work on the scale of the LSST. So the science platform is designed to enable petascale analysis. It's close to the data and it provides you with the resources at the location of the data to enable a very different type of analysis. It includes, as I just mentioned, exploratory analysis tools. It supports the creation of user-generated data products, IVOA protocols for the TAP service, and it will eventually provide a full collaborative working environment whereby you can set up teams and collaborate and share your data and your results and your analysis with your colleagues. There will also be back-end computation resources for you'll be able to submit batch jobs eventually and do processing. I'll just point out that as we go through the data previews, all of this functionality won't yet be available. We will be starting out with a smaller system that's still in development, and we will build up to have all this functionality that you see here available by the time we start operations. Okay, so data preview 0, I just want to give you a little bit of information about data preview 0. We're very excited about this. It's we've been collaborating with DESK, the Dark Energy Science Collaboration, and we are about to, either today or tomorrow, we are going to announce applications for delegates, what we're calling community delegates for data preview 0. So the goal of DP0 is to prepare the community for early science with LSST, but also to serve as an early integration test for our services, for the LSST science pipelines and for the Rubin science platform. So it's not just the community that have to prepare to do science with LSST, we also have to get prepared to be able to enable the science that you want to do. So for Data Preview 0, we're opening it up to 300 scientists and students, in addition to Rubin Observatory staff. So I, for example, would not count amongst this 300. The reason that we are limiting it to 300 at the moment is just simply that we have limited resources. Our systems are still in development. They're not fully functional. We have limited resources, and we also have a limited ability to support the community. So we're building up our community engagement model, we're building up our services, and we're building up the whole infrastructure required to do Rubin Observatory processing. So it's 300 for now, but as we go through the next 3 or so years, that's going to build up to supporting the entire community. So if you don't get involved now, don't worry, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. We are going to initially be serving the DESC DC2 Data Challenge 2 dataset. These are simulated LSST-like data products, which include images and catalogs. I don't have time to go into the details, but there is a lot of information here about the Sky survey that you can go to and have a look at it. Oops, I did not mean to do that. Just a second. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can,
yes.
we can see.
Sorry. Okay, can you still see it now? Sorry, I accidentally clicked on one of my links. I like to put links in talks so people have references, but then sometimes I accidentally click on them. Okay, so as I said, the Rubin Science Platform will be your entry port. This will be based at the Interim Data Facility, which is a cloud-based facility. And we are expecting to open applications today or tomorrow. So please keep an eye on the community forum if you are interested in being involved in Data Preview 0. And I think Rodrigo said that many of you here on the call today are students and postdocs, and we really hope that a lot of students and postdocs will be very excited about starting to try to use our services. This is a link here to, I'm sure you all know, the LSST Community Forum. We have created a category with tags for DP0, Data Preview 0. And you can see there's already a lot of information up about Data Preview 0, details on the technical aspects of the science platform, the accounts, what is available already, how the community will be available, information about the data set, some of the science that can be done with this. Please go and consult this forum, and please keep an eye on it because we will be opening applications to join DP0 very shortly. Okay, I've got about 10 minutes left. Probably a little bit too much material here. So let me just continue to go through this and I'll talk to you about early science. We'll see how far we get. So early science, let's come back now to what we can do before year 1, before we get data release 1. So I've just talked about the data previews and how you can start to prepare to do science with LSST. But what sort of science are we going to be able to do in year 1? There are many uncertainties at the moment around what we can do in year 1. So the operations team is developing a plan to ensure that however commissioning pans out, we will be able to ensure some sort of early science. So we've got 3 scenarios here. First of all, we have a hugely successful commissioning period. We get many templates generated that will cover the sky, whole sky area, and lots of filters. We have a very rich data set. This would be wonderful. This is great. We go ahead. We will be able to then generate alerts in year 1, and this will be good. But another scenario is that commissioning goes well, but we have very little generation of templates for the sky. This means that we won't be able to do alerts. So remember that difference image analysis requires a template of the sky, and you subtract a science image from a template, and then you get a difference image, and that then tells you what has changed on the sky, what has moved, what has changed in brightness, what has changed in position. So the templates that we're talking about here, these are created during a data release, during the processing of data for a data release. So when we start on the sky, we won't have these templates yet. We will not have yet observed enough of the sky and collected enough data in all the filters in order to build templates to do difference image analysis. So the work that we will, so the alerts that we will generate in year 1 will not be at full capacity. So if commissioning goes well, but we don't get a lot of data out of it, we might not have enough data to make templates, and then we might not have much in terms of alerts during year 1. And Another scenario could be that commissioning doesn't actually go very well at all, and you know, we're only just ready to start, but there's still work to do. So based around these sort of scenarios, there are ideas for possibly running a 3 to 6 month campaign for early science in year 1. So this would mean that we would start not by executing the initial survey, but that we would run a dedicated focused science campaign for 3 to 6 months. And this would be a non-survey activity. So again, we'd have to come back to the survey cadence and look at the 10-year science goals and work out, well, how is this going to work together with our 10-year science goals? In this case, if we were to put together a campaign for early science, we'd have to think, you know, what is the best use of this time? What sort of science do we want to do? We want to align this early science as much with our regular survey operations, but we also want to make sure that it will enable science early in the program. So time domain science requires incremental template generation. So we could focus on generating templates, or we could say focus on perhaps observing very specific fields of the sky, so the Magellanic Clouds or some of the deep drilling fields. Some of you may remember that for the Gaia Space Telescope, the first month they focused on looking at the ecliptic poles, and they did this in order to overlap with data from other surveys for verification purposes. And this was a very useful exercise. So providing static catalogs for specific regions of the sky could also be very interesting. Probably what we will think to do here is have a period of review with the community for proposals on what is the best use of this time, and work together with the Reuben community to build a process here. So I think I probably just talked about most of this alert production in year 1, but just to recap, difference image analysis, which is what produces the alerts, requires co-added transient-free template images. And these are built during our regular annual processing of the data, which is called data release production, and they're made available through LSST data releases. So prior to the first data release, we won't have these co-added transient-free template images, which means that we won't have templates with which to do difference image analysis, which means that in year 1, we won't be able to produce alerts. So the statement is, consequently, alert production cannot run at full scale or full fidelity in year 1. And this, of course, leaves us with a problem as to what science do we do and what early science can be done before we get a data release for data release 1. And this is where the commissioning data comes in. How much can we use the commissioning data to build up these templates? We carried out a study internally and came up with the idea that we would attempt to focus commissioning around building templates from all the commissioning data. Now, this could go well, this might not go so well, depending on how well the commissioning period is, but also that year 1, we would put in place a program where we would incrementally create templates as we got the data. So once we had sufficient templates to create sufficient images, single images, to build a template, that we would build those templates, and so slowly we would be able to ramp up the production of alerts during the first year of operations. That's just some details. Okay. I realize, sorry, I've only got about 5 minutes left, so we'll just keep going a bit faster through this. Okay, so if we're going to try to build templates during the first year of operations, this is obviously going to have an effect on the cadence. How do we then focus this? Do we prioritize covering a wide area, or do we prioritize multiple different filters? Different science is going to want different things. So again, this is an area that we're going to start talking to the science community about to get their inputs and ideas for what sort of, not just what sort of early science do we want to do in year 1 before the first data release, but what sort of strategy do we want to adopt for trying to build templates across the sky? Some of the science collaborations have already started to publish research notes that highlight early science opportunities. So do we maximize area? Do we accept noisier images, which will give poorer quality difference images, which will result in a higher which will result in more false detections or bogus alerts? There are many different possibilities. Different cadences and filters will favor different science. They will probably want to run simulations to think about what choices will be made. And of course, any changes to the year 1 cadence, we have to understand the impact on the 10-year science goals. This is just a note here about the early science data products. The early science data products will essentially be the same as the data products that I outlined back in the talk about the data management system. They will include alerts, images, and catalogs. The exact set, however, will be decided closer to the date. As for the data releases, all Rubin data rights holders will have access. These will be distributed via the Rubin Science platform and the alert stream through the data facilities. But they may differ from science products in several ways. For example, early science data products may only be a subset of what would be offered in the full data release, because we won't have covered the full sky, we won't have covered it in all filters. Alert production, as I said, will not run at full scale or fidelity, and we will certainly not have coverage in all filters. So here is just a selection of some of the community input to early science already. You can see that the Transients and Variable Stars Science Collaboration has published 2 research notes on the impact of template acquisition strategies on early science. The Solar System Science community also published a note, and we have an area on our community forum. Please go here and have a look at some of the discussion that's been going on science-driven prioritization of sky templates during the commissioning plans. Some of the conclusions, though, or not really conclusions, I'd say observations and considerations that we can draw already from the community input to early science, is that solar system science, for high impact early solar system science, they prefer template generation options that maximize sky coverage. So they're less interested in having coverage across many filters. Whereas time critical TVS science requires multiple filters, preferably the R and G bands. So this is already a conflicting desire in early science. To address a large range of variability timescales in time domain science, images collected at a range of time separations is also desirable in building these templates up. The Dark Energy Science Collaboration are interested in building up good templates for the deep drilling fields during commissioning for the supernova science. And so supernova science could begin earlier if you have good templates in the deep drilling fields. And in general, I think people are thinking that noisier image subtraction compared to our initial data releases is probably preferable to having no difference image analysis at all. So this is also something to consider. Do we relax the requirements on the noise in templates and end up putting out alerts which are possibly not of as good quality as they would be? This is just a note about how we're going to coordinate early science with the Survey Cadence Optimization Committee, and that we're working with them on recommendations. But it's going to continue on probably over the next couple of years as to what we're actually going to do. And so just finally, now I'll try to finish on time. What's our timeline now for early science? So I've presented to you a lot of various different considerations as to how we're going to enable high impact early science with LSST. We're going to work on our document, our tech note, which will lay out the options for high impact early science, and hope to have that in place sometime around the middle of this year. And we will reach out to the science collaborations to ensure that they have had a chance to give input on this. So that's going to be something like around the middle of this year when we reach out, start talking to science collaborations. We do not want to do this in a vacuum. We want and we solicit science collaboration input to the process of deciding on the strategy for early science. We will review community feedback on alert generation in early science in year 1, understand what the various scenarios are, and then work with the SCOC to get a recommendation. And hopefully by the end of December, at the end of this year, December 21, have some sort of idea on what the early science approach will be. But again, this is something that's going to continue to evolve over the course of commissioning based upon how the commissioning work goes. Here I just provide you with a link to some resources that might be very useful if you want to follow up on any of the things that I've spoken about in this webinar. And I will conclude now just by saying with Reuben's Observatory's mission statement, which is to build a well-understood system that provides a vast astronomical data set for unprecedented discovery of the deep and dynamic universe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Leanne, for this very interesting talk. We now have time for questions from the audience. If you are, if you joined us on YouTube, you can put your question on the comments section and I will redirect them for Leanne. If you are on Zoom, please raise your hand or open the microphone. So questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Leanne, hi, it's Julio. I'm sorry, I just missed the at least I think half of your presentation, but I noted that you said you were preparing tools to provide petabyte data analysis to the community. And exactly, just to know what exactly you mean by community. I mean, just people who have proprietary rights, or no, only anyone who wants to deal with the data may have access, I don't know under which conditions, to your system of computers.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a good question. The community, we define really the community as anyone doing science with Rubin data products. Now, as you know, Rubin data has a proprietary period of 2 years, but after those 2 years, the data products become world public. Again, so that's talking about the data release, the annual release data products. But if we look, if we think about the real-time data, the transient alerts and the prompt products database, these are the alerts that come out every 60 seconds, and the information in the 24-hour database, these are world public. So anyone who wants to do science with those data products is able to. The tools I was referring to specifically are the Rubin Science platform that we're developing. This is something that we will deploy at our data centers at the US data facility, and will also be deployed at the Chilean data center. We are working with what we call independent data access centers throughout the world as part of the in-kind contribution program, and they will also almost certainly deploy the same systems, the Rubin Science platform, at their data access facilities as us.
Okay. Well, I have a question concerning the data preview. In the simulations, will we be able to test any type of time domain science, or?
Yeah, there's you have to go and take a look at the details of what's in DC2, but it was not built around doing time domain science. It's certainly not optimized for that. There are, I believe, some supernovae, but I can point you to a link with the details of what's in the DC2 catalog.
Okay, thanks. More questions? We have still time.
Okay, may I ask another question, perhaps?
Oh,
sure.
It's a recurring one, but I'm going to ask it again. About the data you sent to the Minor Planet Center.
Mm-hmm.
The first question is, will the Minor Planet Center receive all the, for instance, the astrometry with full precision, so the full number of the digits of accuracy from your data, from your observations, and also magnitudes and filters and uncertainties in this, and also the data, the date in this measurement?
Yeah, we're not planning on reducing the data that we send to the Minor Planet Center. They will be sent the full data that's needed to do the solar system processing. Okay.
Okay. And will there be any set of data that belongs to the transient world, but that will not be sent to the MPC? It will remain with the LSST under proprietary rights?
Yeah, so the data that will be sent to the Minor Planet Center will be those objects that have been flagged as a solar system candidate. We won't send every single alert, information about every alert to the Minor Planet Center. We will either flag something as a solar system object, and when we do, we send that to the Minor Planet Center. And the goal here is basically so that LSST doesn't spend time rediscovering objects that are already known. When we see something we will then send it to the Minor Planet Center and take advantage of the existing knowledge already to work with them.
Okay.
Note that all of the alerts, including solar system alerts, will be sent to the community brokers.
Okay.
Thank you, Julie. For the newcomers, people who are about to start or want to know more about the science that could be done with LSST, what documents do you recommend reading first to get a grasp of the science or what needs to be done?
Sure, it's a good question. So the first thing I would recommend that you do is go to the very last webinar in this series of last year, which was given by Željko Ivezic, where he talked about, I think it was entitled LSST, the greatest movie of all time. And he gives an introduction to the science and he goes into depth about science goals. So I made a decision just not to repeat what Željko said in this webinar and to assume that probably a lot of you had already heard that. So if you haven't, I'd say go and have a listen to Željko's talk first. And then I would go to what we call the LSST overview paper. It's I'm sure Željko has a link in his talk, and I certainly have a link in mine. It's called From Science Drivers to Reference Design. It's on the archive. It's version 5 now. This is the science motivating science description paper for Rubin Observatory in the LSST. So that's where I would start.
Okay, thank you very much. We still have time for one question. Someone wants to ask a question? Okay, so if there are no more questions, we will wrap this up now. This presentation, it will be available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. You can find our YouTube channel as youtube.com/LIneA And for the next week webinar, we will have Sunil Musesh, from the University College London. He will talk about a machine learning approach to compute galaxy properties. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone for attending, and a special thanks to Leanne. And everyone have a great day and hope to see you next week.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Leanne. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.